coming at you hot. Agile After Dark has a really amazing guest to talk to us about software engineering, the past, the present, and the future, and how there has to be a cultural change upgrade to technology.
Welcome to Agile After Dark, the podcast that addresses agile topics not talked about in the light of day. I'm your host, Greg Adams Woodford. Sitting here, there is Brandon Gartley, who's the co-host, sitting over there.
What's up, man?
How you doing?
Good, man.
So this is our second podcast.
Yeah, our second podcast of what is the craziest year maybe ever, right? But we had a really good last one with Steve and Shyla talking about Cough's Delay. So excited about that, but excited for today's show for sure.
Cost of delay. I mean, it could be boring, but go back and listen because it actually it's more interesting than it sounds. So I know Jessica's here, who we've known. She's been on the podcast before, right?
A Coco host,
and she's
Coco.
She's one of our favorite people.
She is
for sure.
Yeah,
and she's in the balmy Midwest, upper Midwest region.
She is
in Minneapolis,
near the Canadians.
It actually is balmy today. It's a balmy 35. You know, the snow is melting. Things are good.
Did you have you had any hot dish lately?
No, but we are coming up on lutefisk season.
Oh, lutefisk.
So
lutefisk.
you know, we got that going.
That's a nightmare.
A nice pickly fish flavoring.
So welcome, Jess. And then we also have a really special guest, Stas. And I'm going to say Stas ZV because I can't pronounce his last name. So maybe, Stas, you can
Or is he
help
just like
us
Prince?
with that.
Is he just like Prince? And
Yeah.
he's just Stas.
Stas.
That's right.
Yeah. I like
Or Madonna.
Yeah, or Madonna. yeah.
There, yeah, yep. And don't worry,
We can just
I
roll
can't
with that.
pronounce my last name either. It's fine.
Oh God, yeah. Greg didn't try and pronounce Jess's last name. That was probably a
But Stas, so why don't you give us just a little bit of background about what you've done and where your focus is?
Sure. So I'm a software engineer by training, by many years of practice. I coded for many years. Then at some point wanted to expand my responsibilities. And so I became a software architect, built big software systems. A lot of my experience comes from Yahoo. I spent 13 and a half years there and was responsible for large chunk of the advertising system. And those are fascinating systems technologically. Also, while I was there, I got involved with engineering processes because we were trying to upgrade our engineering processes from something that was started in late 90s, and we wanted to bring it into modern times. And that was probably 8 years ago. And so got involved with engineering processes. Eventually, we got the entire company to adopt modern processes, and our speed went through the roof, our quality went through the roof, the results were really good. And so with that, I went to work for Accenture to try to bring some of that goodness to the rest of the industry. And Accenture is a perfect place for that. It's a global consulting company. So ended up spending 4.5 years there, worked with Fortune 500 companies, federal agencies, helping them with modern architecture and modern processes, so Agile and DevOps, and sometimes even with the organizational models and operating models. And I recently left Accenture, and I'm about to start my next gig. And so this is the perfect time to have this conversation because I'm relaxed. I'm spending time at home in my bubble.
Yeah, that's awesome, Stas. And beyond wanting to know how well you can do the Yahoo yodel, the Yahoo. Beyond that, I know that we're super excited. Greg and I have had an opportunity to work with Stas on actually a few things, and we couldn't think of a better person to get into what we wanted to talk about today, which I think Greg's gonna introduce for us.
Actually, I am really interested in this because we talk about Agile this and Agile that and the frameworks and all that, but today we're going to talk about technology, and the title that you gave it is "Technology Needs a Culture Change / Upgrade." And so I'm interested in what you think that means.
Yeah, well, there wasn't meant to be a slash. It was meant to be a quip, if you will, or a joke, or something that grabs people's attention. But I mean, there's something to it, which is there's a lot in terms of cultural change that we've talked about in the past, right? In terms of transformation, how do we change people's mindsets, people's behaviors? Um, and using the word upgrade at the end is meant to kind of tie into kind of the technology mindset that a lot of people have, not necessarily Stas, but when people think about technology, they're thinking about, well, when's my next upgrade? When is it going to get better? When am I getting 5.0, 6.0, 7.0? And I think what we wanted to talk with Stas about today is, where do we come from in that way in terms of how to maybe get to that mindset? What were the changes, the main sort of change that happened, and then go from there. And I think Jess kind of wanted to kick us off with Stas with kind of that sort of approach.
Yeah, really excited to have someone here that actually knows a thing or two about software, unlike some folks on the call.
So true.
What does that mean? I didn't come here to be attacked, Jessica.
Love you, Greg.
Keep answering your phone calls during the show.
Yeah, answer your phone or try to not answer your phone, Greg. So, Stas, we'd like to talk a little bit about some of the major shifts in software engineering so far. So a little bit past looking, given what you've seen in your experience.
Sure. How much time do we have?
A lot, buddy.
Yeah. So I'm going to start this conversation, I think, in from the times a long time ago, right? Long time ago in the galaxy, far away. And then do interrupt me because we want to make this interactive. So what has happened more recently in the last 20, 30 years is software approaches to software engineering changed completely, right? And there is a reason for that, and I'll go over that in a second. And it's not that the old approaches were wrong, right? It's not that waterfall was wrong or scientific management was wrong. It was right for the context, right? But the context changed. And so the new approaches were required. And we have developed those approaches over the past 20, 30 years. And so in order for us to understand what we have today, it's always best to start from a long time ago and understand where the old approaches came from. And really, they start from the late 19th century.
Oh, I like the sound of this, Craig. I like the sound of this.
We got nerd alert.
Yeah, I'm loving this.
Alert.
If it's in the 1800s, I'm all for it. So,
well, that's right. And so, if you think about it, the Industrial Revolution took a while to get going, right? But in the second half of the 19th century is where we're starting to see large size enterprises, right? And large size enterprises required processes because those processes did not exist prior to that. And that's where Frederick Taylor comes in, and they develop scientific management, right? And what they say is that efficiency is your North Star in the large enterprise. And so you optimize for efficiency, which means this is where command and control comes from. This is where hierarchical organizations come from, separations of managers and workers, long-term planning, all of the good things that we associate with traditional enterprises.
So could I interrupt Stas real quick?
Yeah.
I mean, this is basically where they were saying, why have this guy who has this degree over here moving rocks, have the guy that's good at moving rocks over here move rocks, and have the guy that has this degree do management? Is that?
Well, yeah. And so the person who's moving rocks, we're going to train them to move rocks really efficiently. And then here's another guy who really knows how to make, a cement mixture or something. We're gonna train them really efficiently, right? And somebody is gonna know how to lay bricks, and they're gonna get really good in their specific task. And then there's a manager on top who will organize and optimize this entire process. And so that's the approach from late 19th century, early 20th century.
So what's wrong with that? What's wrong with that, Stas?
Well, and it was called scientific. What was it was called something, right?
Scientific measurement.
Scientific, yeah.
So what's
scientific
wrong with
measurement.
that?
So,
Sounds like a
yeah, I mean,
completely practical way to approach problem solving.
Well, it sounds like a factory, right?
Well, that's exactly it, and it works really well. In fact, it's still used in the majority of factories around the world, everywhere. It's being used with great efficiency, with great success. It improved productivity tremendously over the last 150 years. It lifted a lot of people out of poverty. It's a good thing. So by itself, it's a good thing. So now the question is, how does that relate to software engineering, and why did I start there? So again, where did software engineering come from? So we have to go back to 1950s and 1960s, where the computer industry really started getting going. And you cannot blame anybody for adopting methods and processes that we knew that worked well in the industry into computer industry, right? And so these same methods were adopted, and they also worked, and they took us into 80s and 90s, right, with again tremendous success. But something happened in the 80s and 90s that that broke that approach.
Neon pants? No, not neon pants. That wasn't it.
Parachute pants.
Parachute
I think
pants?
is what you're
parachute pants.
about.
Yeah,
I think it was
neon
the parachute
pants. No, that wasn't it.
Yeah. See, I was going to build up to that, but you stole my thunder.
Damn it. Okay.
No. So a couple of things actually changed with in the 80s and 90s. If you think about it, for the first time, computers became consumer focused with PCs, and then later internet. And then internet came around. And there is actually one thing that went unnoticed, but I think mathematically and mechanically had the largest impact on software engineering practices. It's how we ship software. So if you go back to the 80s, do you remember how we shipped software in the 80s? We had floppies.
The actual floppies, not like what looks like the save icon floppy now, like the big floppies. Right?
Yeah, exactly, or even those.
Okay.
But regardless, those were physical devices. Right? Those were physical devices. And if I need to ship software on a physical device too, how frequently can I do that? I can do it maybe once or twice a year, right? And which means
it has to be perfect, because otherwise you have
it has to be perfect. Exactly. And so my batch size becomes huge too, because I'm just going to try to squeeze all of these features into this one release per year. Right. And in fact, this is queuing theory in action, where you're seeing large transaction cost results in large batch size. And so that went on until the internet came around. And with the internet, one critical thing changed. Because with the internet, I can go onto the production server. Not that I would ever do that, but I could go to production server.
For those of you on the podcast that can't see Stas's face, there was just the tiniest bit of a smile when he said he would not go on the production server.
I will claim the fifth.
So I mean, Stas, we have talked about how much room that porn takes up in server farms in this podcast in the past. So you're free. You're good. We're
okay.
We got free reign here.
It's a safe space.
Yes, it is.
So you could go onto production server and modify one character if you want, right? And within a split second, it's in the hands of your consumer. So your transaction cost went down to zero. At which point your batch size becomes, one character, 1 byte, which immediately mechanically enables speed, enables you to ship software as many times as you can. Right? And so what we started seeing with the internet era is companies taking advantage of this capability, right? Launching fast, learning for production, trying new things, adapting, pivoting, doing various things. Right. So taking advantage of speed. In addition to that, you have new technologies coming onto the playing field. So you have internet, you have mobile, you have AI, right? And all the disruptions in the history of the world is technological disruption, has always been on top of these technological innovations, step function improvements in technology. There's that. And now there's ability for anybody in the world to access the latest and greatest technology without any capital investment, because cloud companies make it available immediately. As soon as it's out there, as soon as it's good quality, it's out there and available.
So, Stas, let me ask a question. Distributed sort of models for software have been around for much longer than the cloud, right? What? And then AWS came around, and they're like, "Oh, we just dial up and dial down," but it was really expensive. Like, what was the? I'm interested to hear from your perspective. What makes it more interesting than it was in the past, right? Because you had in the 80s, you had servers and, distributed networks and that kind of thing. But what happened with, I say AWS just because I have personal experience with them. They're expensive to spool things up and spool things down. But what you're saying is it might be worth it.
Yeah, and I think if you invite, if Frederick Taylor would show up today, and they would look at how companies operate, modern companies operate, his hair would be standing up on his head, because it's the opposite. It's the opposite of efficiency, right? In many cases, companies take speed over efficiency, right? If you look at how Amazon operates or Facebook operates, right? Lots of decentralization, lots of redundancy. But because they can move so fast, because they can make decisions quickly and implement those decisions quickly, that more than compensates for lack of efficiency. Or it's not necessarily lack of efficiency. You can still have quite a lot of efficiency. It's just not as perfect as scientific management would like it to be.
So I don't want to interrupt kind of the phase that you're going into, but I'm kind of curious. We've been talking about software engineering very much from a technology standpoint, but I'm curious from the actual engineer standpoint. When we're talking about software engineers, I think in Agile After Dark, we try and kind of dive into what are some of the commonalities that people have in their minds and how they look at things versus what's really under the covers and what's really going on day to day. And so for me, I think it's interesting in that when you look at how developers or engineers and what is the difference between those two, which is important. When I want Stas to maybe get into that a little bit, but I from experience working in a lot of enterprise companies, top 500, top 50, where they're saying, yeah, like I want a change done. I have that change order gone through the system and someone's in a room punching numbers and code and they're supposed to make that change. And I don't want any sort of creative license against that. And that's where a lot of people, I think, look at developers / engineers and say, yeah, they're there just to implement what I want to implement. And so we talked about the scientific management system of, you're good at moving rocks. You're good at being management. Is there a different level now in terms of, well, maybe I know a better way to move those rocks because I've been moving those rocks?
Yeah, no, so definitely, because I think it's wrong to compare before and after point by point, because the new world is completely different, right? It operates under a very different set of physical laws, right? And so we have to think about it from the perspective of, if you look at software engineering, you were talking about software engineering. It is kind of like what you were describing in a sense. There is a concept, there's an idea, and you're trying to turn it into feature. Like we've all heard of concept to cache, right? And we're trying to optimize that entire value stream, concept to cache. We're not even talking about concept to cache. We're talking about concept to a feature in production, right? That's where software engineering, if you narrowly focus on software engineering, that's where it plays. And so if you look at that value stream, concept to feature in production, and you try to optimize it for speed as opposed to efficiency, what happens, right? So before we described, we had command and control, hierarchical management structures, et cetera, and people optimized for moving rocks. So what does the new world looks like? And so to answer that question, you kind of have to play this mental game and try to apply a theory of constraints onto software engineering as it exists, or in this value stream of concept to feature and production. And ask yourself a question: where is the first bottleneck? And from my experience working with multiple companies, many companies, especially in Fortune 500 space, the first bottleneck is coupling of people, coordination of people, inability to move independently of each other. And to put it simply, an organization of 1,000 people cannot move fast. Like an organization of 500 people cannot move fast. And when you talk about my family, an organization of 5 people cannot move fast. Right? And so the answer to that's the first bottleneck. And the answer to that is decentralization and decoupling, right? Which comes primarily in 2 forms. One is mechanical architectural decentralization. So that's why we talk about microservices and reactive architectures, right? Not because they're just, it's a fad, but because it allows us to break up organizations and give them the ability to move components and give them the ability to move and execute independently and operate independently of each other. So there's a mechanical aspect to decentralization. But then there's a second aspect to decentralization, which is organization and governance. And this is where a lot of companies run into trouble, right? The inability to decentralize decision making and inability to give individual teams the tools and the power and enablement to move independently, make decisions independently, and take responsibility for their actions independently.
So that's one of the larger kind of barriers to what you were talking about before, is being able to make a change and have it happen in production minutes, seconds later. And one of the bigger barriers is the inability to get through the organizational.
Exactly.
Right.
And also, my experience, if you're talking about large organizations trying to move fast, the best case scenario, they're spending 20-25% coding. The rest of the time, they're trying to coordinate. The rest of the time, they're trying to release because they're so entangled with each other.
So they're not the automatons of lore of, I've got a room full of developers, engineers, what do you want to call them, like pressing buttons away, because that would be counter to what you just said. Or automatons, not tauntauns. Tauntauns are the Star Wars, like smelly things, right?
Well, Stas knows.
Wars we have well. I had to build on the Star Wars references, right?
So that's your first bottleneck, right? And let's say you resolve this bottleneck and you decentralize your organization, you decentralize your architecture, and now you have small independent teams moving at their own pace with their own responsibilities, which is a major step forward, right? So then we start talking about what does software engineering look like on those independent teams, right? And what is the second bottleneck? And again, from experience, I would say that the second bottleneck is typically inability to get bits out to production. So from developer fingers to production, it just takes way too long to get bits out there, because there are so many handoffs and there are so many manual steps in that process, right? And so we're talking about, this is 2020. For the past 10 years or so, we have the ability to completely automate that process. From developer fingers to production. There is no excuse not to automate it. It's been done with all kinds of technologies. It's been done with systems large and small. It's been done in the most complex regulated environments you can imagine, banks and pharmaceutical companies. So I don't want to hear it when somebody gives me excuses for not doing it. There is no excuse for not doing it.
I have a question for you, because I know, at least for me, oftentimes I run into the argument of, that can be done, and list off a series of organizations, but we're different, or we've got this many regulations, we've got this many, all of these other things that we need. And literally, even yesterday, I was told that it's not worth automating a system because in 3 to 5 years, they're going to get rid of it.
Right. Two different conversations. One is it will not work for me, and I will call BS on that. And there's really no excuse not to automate. The second question is it worth it, right? Because it is a major capital investment, right? And if this system is in maintenance mode and it's going to take me 6 months of work to automate a software release, and then it's going to shut down in 3 to 5 years, maybe there is no ROI on that. I think that's a fair conversation. But if that system is seeing constant feature development, then absolutely things need to be automated to get, again, this is just the first step, get bits out to production. So which involves automating build, certification, assembly, deployment, whatever happens in that pipeline.
It's interesting that we're talking about cultural change. I think that for me has been one of the biggest things I've observed from a cultural change standpoint that kind of led into what the title of this was because it really became the DevOps, that bringing ops into dev and not just doing it to say, oh, okay, we're going to make the handoff to ops faster. It's like we need to bring ops into, as you said, from the fingers of the developers to production faster. I think it's also interesting that you use the theory of constraints concept there because that's, Goldblatt, the goal, that stuff that was, very much a manufacturing way of looking at things in a different way and trying to approach that. So how do we, look at, with DevOps being the most recent cultural change, what are some of the things that you're seeing now, Stas, that are, to build on what Jess was asking, that are the biggest bottlenecks and the constraints that we're having to either throw capacity at or throw some opportunities at to improve it?
And I would add to this, why does the business care? So in your answer, Stas, why does the business care?
So the business should care, and they do care about their ability to respond to market challenges and take advantage of market opportunities, right? And if you just talk about that requires what I typically refer to as continuous adaptability. And there are many aspects that would go into developing a continuously adaptable organization, from being extremely data obsessed to being to have analytics capabilities to make sense of that data, to ability to make fast decisions, to pivot fast, to pay attention to establish value hypotheses and then prove them right or wrong, etc. But all of this relies on the fact that you can deliver software fast to production, develop software and deliver it fast to production. And if you can't, then what good is the rest of the capability? Ability to get bits out to production still doesn't mean that you have bits, those bits are of high quality, right? Or that they carry any value. So after you get that ability to get them to production, you need to have the invest in things like, and typically, your typical XP practices to make sure you're not shipping garbage to production, right? That you build quality in. So things like unit testing, TDD, or pair programming, or maybe code reviews, whatever you're into, right? Develop maintainable code, right? So that's important. But even that is not sufficient, right? Because you're having, okay, so you're sending bits to production, maybe they're of high quality, but who knows if there's any value in there? And so that's where value-oriented processes come in. So agile processes are typically value-oriented processes, because the first step is you prioritize your backlog by value, right? And so you need to have an engineering process on top. So finally, we're talking about a process, not mechanics. And then even building on that, once you get those features to production, so now we're talking about features or chunks of features. So you have this value hypothesis, but it's just a hypothesis. How do you prove it true? And so you need to have the ability to measure whatever's important to you, critical measures that are important to you, to reason about your features and your value and prioritization, right? And that's kind of how, this is where, in my mind, the bottlenecks of software engineering get resolved. And after that, you start looking at the wider picture and look at various aspects of the enterprise that are not software engineering related.
So, Stas, it's interesting that you say that, because one of the things that I've noticed in several organizations is that they do a lot of the right stuff all the way up to validating their hypotheses. So from a software engineering standpoint, where's that gap, or how do we close that gap?
Well, so I think step one is you asked, actually, Brendan asked a question that we never got to, which was like, what fails? And like you still see companies trying to develop their agile capabilities, Scrum, Safe, whatever you name it, without addressing some of those mechanical steps of having the ability to release fast. And of course, it's not working out well for them. And then you also mentioned DevOps, right? Having some of that operations mindset, integrating some of those operating capabilities up front, right? And so once you go there, I think it becomes much easier to gather necessary, because the mechanics are very similar, gathering necessary critical metrics and feedback in production. It's somewhat, in my mind, the concept of the DevOps, cultural concept of DevOps, of taking the mindset of operations into development, operates very similar to what, Jess, you're talking about, where you need to take product mindset into development, right? It's BizOps, if you will, or dev BizOps, whatever. There's a lot to be said about developers understanding the value behind the features that they're building, right? And so integrating, first of all, that understanding and alignment on understanding of business value in whatever specific domain or specific context, and then having the ability to capture those metrics in production and make sense of them, right? So to me, it still starts with those mechanics of software delivery and operations, and then on top of that, you build the capabilities to gather business metrics.
So, if you have 5 developers and that every week they make 2 decisions, right? So they make 10 to 20 decisions on how to develop software because they're doing the work. They're actually doing it. If they don't have an understanding of the product, of what you're trying to do, the feature or whatever it is, then it's for naught, because it doesn't matter, because they're going to make those decisions because they love to build stuff and they love to develop things, and they're going to just do it whether or not they have the right direction. Do you agree with that?
So I'm going to change it a little bit. And I would say, developers will show up at 9 in the morning or whenever they wake up, and then they will start typing. And they will be typing for the next 8 hours, right? So it's your job to make sure that as they're typing, they're making decisions every second, right? So as a manager, you're no longer sitting there command and controlling them. You need to give them guidance and heuristics to make right decisions. And then coming back to what you were saying, unless they intrinsically understand the product and the business value behind that product and their customers, they're going to make a bunch of silly decisions along the way.
I like to call it gold plating, Stas, because developers like, ooh, I can come up with the most interesting way to solve this problem in 12 steps versus 2, because that's the challenge, right? Where's the challenge? I don't see it. You see it, Greg? I don't see a challenge.
I don't see it.
But I mean, that's in my experience, most of the time, it's different than what maybe people normally think, which is, oh, if I don't give enough guidance to them, they're going to do very little. My experience is when I've seen business not give the understanding of this is what we're trying to achieve, and they're kind of like, oh, we need to do this, and then they kind of disappear. Then they're like, wow, we're going to make the coolest thing you could ever imagine.
God,
because
they're developers. They want to build cool stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the mentality I'm saying is different than maybe kind of the standard person that's thinking about what a developer / engineer does.
Well, but if your developers are fully aligned with your product people and your business people and your sales people as to what the company is going after, the mountain that you're trying to climb, they're not going to be working on some random stuff. They will be part of the mission and they will be contributing to the mission. But if you disenfranchise them up front and treat them as automatons, then what do you expect?
They're gonna be tauntauns, and they're gonna be smelly, and they're not gonna get the stuff done. That's because they're gonna show up at 12 and leave at 4.
So I think it's time for a break.
I think it is time for a break because
well.
I'm trying to force Star Wars references in here, so it's time for a break.
Of course, I know Tauntaun.
What are those little furry things? They're like Miwoks or something. Ewoks.
Ewoks. Oh my god.
See, yeah.
The worst ever.
Oh my
Hey,
gosh.
I have the best Ewok costume.
Oh,
So cute. Got cute ears.
that's
Never
awesome.
mind.
All right, well, we're going to transition to break, and as usual, we have an episode sponsor, so we'll pitch it over to the sponsor. Our sponsor today is Easy Changes. Easy changes are what everyone is looking for, and no one seems to be able to implement. Change a date.
Should be no problem.
That's right. Need to add a field?
Well, that sounds like as easy as pie. Although I don't know what that means. Is that Andy Griffith, 1950s? What is easy as pie?
That's right, Greg. Sign up now to join the petition to tell your nearest developer that they need to stop being so difficult. Easy changes are here to stay.
Well, and I'm gonna fudge it a little bit so we can, because I'm like, what the hell does that mean?
Yeah, exactly. So he's gonna ruin the ad the first time.
Like,
so
are
don't.
we in the 1950s?
Great, because he's never been able to actually follow a script ever. I don't know why I thought this time would be any different. Never mind.
By the way, we did it last
Cancel my
time.
notes.
To give Jess a lot of credit, we did it last time.
Yeah, it's because I wasn't involved. It was the two of you.
True.
Director's note.
And we're back.
And we're back.
Yeah, we're back. All right. So after that amazing conversation in the first bit, I think we all needed to grab a drink, refresh, regather ourselves. So let's start with our guest, actually. Our friend Stas. Stas, only known as Stas, like Madonna and Prince. What does someone of a celebrity of that type actually drink?
Well, he's Stas ZV.
Yeah. Well,
Lowercase v.
Yeah.
Let's see. So I'm drinking Four Roses small batch bourbon.
Oh, my guy.
Very sophisticated. I think I should go ask her something sophisticated like that. I'm bringing out the drink, Jess. I'm doing it. You're gonna see it.
I
Oh
can
my
see
God.
I can see the blue. I almost commented on it earlier.
Yeah,
I'm
yep.
just
So this is what I'm calling
deeply embarrassed for you already.
Stas. I'm calling the CBGG drink,
Mm.
which is
And
Gatorade Cool Blue with Grey Goose. So CBGG. That's my drink of
Nice.
choice tonight.
It's a wreck of Grey Goose.
Yeah,
What?
it's like Grey Goose
last-
with hydration.
Well, the last time you drank
electrolytes. They're good for you.
Drink.
Actually, that sounds good.
Blue drink essentially was because we've gone a little too far off the deep end. And it turns out apparently you like it. This is a drink of choice, this Powerade situation.
Yeah, when you got a kid, you can't get too drunk these days. It's
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
like you go to bed at
hydrated.
12 and feel a little like I had a bit of drink. He doesn't care. He wakes up at 3.
And then you look at him and you say, dude, I'm good. I just drank a whole bunch of electrolytes. Let's do this
Let's
thing.
do this. You want to play? Done.
Yeah. Okay.
You want to laugh? Done.
That's
You want to
true.
poop?
What's
Done.
your problem? Like, you drinking electrolytes, what's your problem?
Well, that's what I'm saying. I'm thinking ahead, which is actually very apropos to our section. But we still haven't heard from Jess what Jess is drinking. I'm sure it's going to be something very exotic.
I almost grabbed my small batch, and then right next to it was the Basil Hayden's. So I grabbed his Basil Hayden's tonight.
Ooh.
All right.
Basil on the rocks. Yep, delicious.
Your place looks nice. Are you in your new place?
Thank you. Yes, I am. I'm excited about it. I'm no longer in the hovel. There's like a whole room behind me. It's crazy.
People on the podcast can't see this, but she has a very nice looking guitar in the corner in the back of her room. I'm just waiting for her to rock out, and then like be Yahoo, and like end the night. What are you drinking,
Oh,
Jeff?
got my lead singer already. I can tell.
Gregory.
I'm doing the typical vodka cranberry.
That's not cranberry though.
Is not?
No,
What
it's good for the fatty liver.
Oh yeah, it's
Vodka pomegranate, right?
pomegranate.
Yeah.
I'm surprised, Greg.
You're sticking with it.
I've been told you're a connoisseur of jello shots.
There's photographic evidence of me not liking the jello shot.
So we were talking about this is where we need to get to the point, Jess, and you may or may not approve of this, where like a lot of podcasts, we need to start recording the podcast so that people can actually see us having our conversations. But
Wine and crime does it.
yeah, I know.
After a nice long day at work, the first thing I want to do is be on a video recording.
Oh my gosh. So with that being the case about talking about the future, we wanted to really get into with Stas. We had a really good conversation in the first section about kind of how we got to where we're at, and based on his vast experience, really understand where he sees kind of a technology going, but keeping to the theme of kind of the culture change and how technology. Yeah, we have the theories in terms of things that get smaller and faster, right? Through just kind of advances. But where does it, where's the next DevOps, sort of kind of thought process? And,
Yeah, it's sort of like microservices it makes total sense, but how does that translate to business?
Yeah, and what's kind of the next steps in what you're seeing, Stas, and whether it's what you're seeing or what you think is going to be out there in the future.
Yeah, no. So I mean, this is total speculation on my part, but what I'm thinking is that whatever is mechanical, whatever doesn't require human judgment, will be automated and hidden by the platforms. So all of those things that we discussed about bits getting to production quicker, that doesn't require a lot of human judgment, right? A lot of that can be automated and hidden by the platforms and abstracted away by the platforms, and cloud providers will do it for us. So we don't have to wait long for that. On the other hand, whatever does require human judgment will still be there 10, 20, 30 years from now. So architectural conversation will probably still happen 20 years from now. You still need to make human judgment around the value proposition of certain features, right? That will still persist. But I think once you go through all of the steps that I discussed, you reach a point where software engineering is no longer your bottleneck. And this is where we need to start applying things that I mentioned in the first part to the larger business, being data obsessed, being focused on data analytics, and being user obsessed, having the ability to make quick decisions and follow up on them. And in a sense, you kind of applying the same fundamental principles, but to the entire enterprise. And we don't have to go far for examples of companies that operate like that today, be that Google or Amazon. And these are the powerhouses of today, right? And unless other companies can match those capabilities, they will be crushed.
What do you see as the barriers from going from kind of almost more still stuck in the 90s, almost maybe early 2000s, to being the Yahoo, the Amazon,
No, so you have some very few examples of companies going through that transition successfully. I think my favorite example is always Walmart, right? Amazon shows up and starts competing with you. You can roll over or you can try to fight, and they chose to fight, and they've done tremendously well for themselves, right? But those examples are few and far between. Most companies, for whatever reason, and it's mostly their internal reasons, are incapable of prioritizing future over immediate needs, right? Whether it's because a lot of the C-level executives are not there for a very long time. Life expectancy of a C-level executive is very short nowadays, and they have very short-term goals. Part of it is just how public companies are operating and what Wall Street forces them to do. So it's very hard for a lot of them to take this long-term view and make the right investments. And if your short-term, and if your C-level executives are only there for a short term, they need to show very quick results and move on, right? So there is just not a lot of long-term thinking and long-term investment that's happening at the C-level or in the boardrooms.
How does that trickle down to the engineering side? Those short-term decisions,
yeah.
How does that trickle down into the culture of what's happening with the engineering?
Right. So you cannot really make any changes. So all of these attempts at agile transformations or DevOps implementation can maybe solve, first of all, a lot of them just outright fail. But if they do succeed, they solve just one small area of the entire value stream, right? And they do not result in something that's impactful to the entire enterprise. But that's the good example. The bad example is when everything is being very short-term oriented. That eventually all of these companies come to the point that it's all about cost cutting because they cannot compete, they cannot generate new sources of revenue, and so revenue growth starts slowing down. They get into this vicious cycle of cost cutting, and it's very hard to get out of it. Right? Very few companies escape that cycle, and so life becomes very difficult for line level engineers. I think a lot of us have probably lived through that.
It's really interesting that you bring up that the C-suite is I hate to say life expectancy for someone at that level is short. Building off of that, then if we're talking about cultural change, because that's not going to be the focus for them, they're going to be focused on, to your point, either it's cost cutting or it's delivering a specific thing to a specific customer to make their name. Who then, from I kind of want to say from a technology standpoint, let's start there and then we can build off of it. From looking at how does software engineering cultural change happen then, if it's not coming from a CTO, for instance, where do you see that originating from?
Oh, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen unless it has executive sponsorship. By the way, it's no incident that I mentioned Walmart and they were able to take a long-term view because Walton family is still there and they still feel ownership of that company.
And they understand supply chain and value chain is probably not a big
of course.
Jump for them.
Yeah. A lot of these companies, if you think about it, the classic example of Netflix versus Blockbuster. Blockbuster had all the assets to go to war with Netflix. They didn't have the ability to move fast and adapt fast. But they had brand name recognition, they had the distribution, they had customer base, they had presence in every corner, and how fast, and they had advanced warning. People were saying Netflix is coming for you for 10 years.
And I met Prince in a Blockbuster once, so I would have stuck with that forever, just on the chance of meeting Prince again. The perks of living in Minnesota.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. So that takes us to an interesting place, Stas, for this section, because the technology is going to continue at the pace it's going to, and when we talk about that, the title of this is Technology Needs a Culture Change Upgrade. It seems apropos, but I don't know where it comes from, and I don't know what the answer is, and I don't mean to put you on the spot, but it seems to me to be a call that's actually more important than maybe we thought of when we put this concept of a podcast together.
But I'll ask this question to Stas. Is product more important than technology? Is product management more important than technology? Because technology, they'll build anything you want them to build. If they can't understand, because of bad communication, the value of what they're trying to do, the vision of what they're trying to do, they don't, it doesn't matter what they do. They can build the greatest stuff in the world, but that doesn't matter.
What's more important, an arm or in the leg? Or a leg, right? I think both are important. But I see where you're going, right? If you can somehow magically, if you're a product person, you have a brilliant idea, and you can go to a cloud provider, be it that AWS or GCP or whoever, and assemble your product yourself, then, or you pay some cheap labor somewhere. They can do it quickly for you and cheaply. Then technology is just that, it's commodity. Right? That's one view. I think that's a valid view for a lot of use cases. However, all the best companies are masters of their domain, both product-wise and technology-wise. Right? And you see some of those best companies actually outsourcing some of the commodity aspects of running a company, or some of the commodity aspects of technology stack. But where it matters, where it comes to their revenue and their specific domain knowledge and their specific domain know-how, it is absolutely vital for them to have those technological capabilities.
So if you were to look at the guy that came up with the waterfall paper back in the day, worked for, I can't remember, but anyway, he basically was like, hey, this is the way that I see things going, but and here's the illustrations of the different gateways and stuff, and at the end of the paper he's like, this is fraught with problems, and we should think about prototyping all this stuff, but no one paid attention to that, right? They just were like, oh yeah, that's exactly the way we're doing stuff.
This was our first podcast.
It was, yeah, and that shows my age. It's been a couple of years, and I used to be able to bring up his name on command. But where we're going with technology, it seems as though with the concept of DevOps, with the concept of cloud, versus on-prem, you're able to like spin things up really quickly and so forth. There's a lot of excitement in terms of the possibilities. But to what you've been saying, Stas, and Jess's questions, and what Greg came up with, my thought and question to you is, have we kind of hit that point where, yeah, we can describe what it is, but we're still fraught with problems that are just around the corner, and we should be thinking about it in a different way?
Also, transformations are not easy. I would say that at this point, our development, we know all of the ingredients of success. We know what needs to be done. It's just the resolution to get it done. It's the will to get it done, the fortitude. And yes, there is some complications in how you go about it and lots of moving pieces. But first and foremost, I do not see that will in a lot of places. I see the desire, but they're not willing to pay what it takes.
Yeah, that's illuminating and something that I think all of us have seen. We had a podcast about what we call management debt, right, which is similar to technical debt, where people have been brought up through a system for a long time, and they cough and then get in the way of things, and it's not Jessica coughing this time; it's actually Greg.
Might be the first.
Yeah, it's a first. But it's interesting to hear you say that, Stas, because we've had conversations in this podcast about bottom up or top down transformation, and what actually makes sense. But I think more and more, as I've had conversation with people much smarter than myself, it comes down to that leadership and that understanding of, we're going to go all in, if the poker standpoint, and say, we really think this is the direction we need to go, but there's very few people that are willing to make that commitment.
Well, it's the bravery of the stick-to-itiveness, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a brave decision to continue on, even though, because what we all know is in transformations, it's just as Scott said, it's not easy. It's hard, and it's the bravery to get through the hard.
Yeah.
And actually make it to the other side of the mountain. So many people quit at the first summit or the second summit, whatever it is, the first, what do you call it? The base camp, the first base camp or the second base camp. And if you're not willing to go all the way to the top, then
that's right.
That first base camp is better than not doing it all. But that first base camp is not going to let you see the sunrise at the top of Machu Picchu.
That's right. The question is always, who's going to stick their neck out? Who's going to take the risk? Because the chances of success are pretty, slim by what companies are used to. And there's a lot of reasons for that. But who's willing to take on that 5-year project of transformation? with lots of hurdles along the way. Who's gonna take that risk where they can get their, just very specifically, they can get their annual bonus by just delivering in their normal way, just the regular set of features and cost cutting along the way as well. It takes a real leader, takes a real visionary who will make the decision and also allow their people to make mistakes.
Exactly right. And it seems to me as the more that we have real leadership in a multitude of companies and organizations, it makes it easier for other leaders to say, we want to go be like that. We want to go in that direction. And then obviously they have to figure it out for themselves. But if there are several examples of how to get this done, at least they don't feel like they're in a vacuum. So I guess my question for you, Stas, is what's that next step that we can prove is possible?
In software engineering transformations?
Mm-hmm.
So to me, proving that it's possible is very easy because so many companies have done this already, right? And there is also, beyond that, we can even create a very simple roadmap, a traditional roadmap that people take to go through a transformation. And the mechanical part is what I described with, starting with getting bits out to production, putting quality in, putting value in, then, hypothesis-driven development, things like that. And then we can layer up cultural change management aspects to that as well, with communications and training and things like that. There are very standard roadmaps and transformational roadmaps that at high level will probably look very similar if you talk to any consulting company, or people who have done this multiple times will create you a roadmap. That's probably somewhat they're probably somewhat similar. So that's not a problem. The first step is commitment from the leaders, commitment and willingness to go through pain, to go through mistakes, and allowing their people let their people roam free and make their own decisions and take responsibility for those decisions and for the mistakes, and creating that culture. That's the responsibility of leadership. I think that's the first step.
It's amazing that we've gone from what, if you look at the title of this, is technology needs a cultural change upgrade, and we've gone to leadership really needs a cultural change upgrade to influence and make that happen. So with that, I want to go to a break and make sure that you, as always, go to feedback at agileafterdark.com to give any feedback on the podcast. As I mentioned before, it's now available on Spotify and iTunes, so look up Agile After Dark, and we'll catch you on the other side.
You know what I'm gonna ask?
Yes,
take
a quick break. That's what you say. Yeah. I'm gonna make
actually,
another. I'm gonna make another CBGG. Does anyone want one?
I'd like a jello shot, please.
Yeah.
But wait. So I'm not vegan, and all I eat is McDonald's. It's cheap.
That's what my husband eats.
We're on iTunes, Spotify, and if you have any feedback, send it to feedback@agileafterdark.com.
That's right. The whole interweb. It's just like it's amazing what it does.
And thank you so much to Stas to spend his time doing this. I really appreciate it.
Yeah.
Jess, not so much, because whatever, but
I mean,
I think Jess did have one final sort of thing she wanted to ping Stas about, and then kind of let them wrap up on that.
Yeah, I guess I was curious about data analytics and making sure that we understand the data and making decisions based on that information that we get. Where do you see the line in ethical practices? I'm really thinking more about like maybe the feeds that we get or the information or the ads that we receive. Where's the line on like complete capitalism versus making sure that everybody has somewhat of the same information. As a technologist, how do you make sure that that happens?
Yeah, no, so I think again there are mechanical aspects to it that are that need to be taken care of. One is it's as you collect the data, it's quite easy to do it in a very anonymized or even not in a personless way, where the data is just data about feature usage and it doesn't relate to specific users, right? So we solved that aspect of it, right? We don't include any personally identifiable information or even anonymized forms of that. But then the second question is like, what do you do with that data? Once you gather the data, you can optimize your product potentially to the point where it crosses the ethical barrier to manipulation. That line, thankfully, we still have time to figure that out for most products. But for in situations like social networks or advertising, I think that's a very pertinent conversation even today. At the end of the day, it comes down to values that the company carries into the conversation, and the policies developed on top of those values. And I don't think there is and of course, government regulations. I do not think there is an easy answer to that. And companies will have to go through a lot of evolution of those approaches, and they will draw the lines in very different places. And we can see it even between social networks, they're drawing the lines in different places today, and between advertising companies as well. I think companies will have to go through that. We as a society will have to go through that. I don't know that we have a prescribed answer today.
Well, you may not have that answer today, Stas, but I'm sure you will tomorrow or in the very near future. So we hope we get to have you back on the show. Thank you so much for your time, and to my co-hosts. This is another episode of Agile After Dark. Please give feedback to feedback@agileafterdark.com. Until then, talk to you next time. One, two, three. Easy changes.
Easy changes are
Here to stay. Did you not get that right?
Wait,
Okay.
developers.
So we're all
are
doing it
difficult?
together. All of
No.
us. Easy changes are here to stay. So I'm going to count.
Oh, I was supposed to say
Yeah.
that.
It says all of us, Greg. I'm just
All of
driving
us.
this-
All of us.
all of us.
Okay.
Okay.
Right, well, let's
Okay,
take
so
two.
I'll count down. 3, 2, 1. Easy. Okay, right. Ready? 3, 2, 1. Easy changes.
Easy
are-
changes
here
are
to
here to
stay.
stay.
Okay, it's 3, 2, 1, go. Not 3, 2, 1.
So it's not two.
No, it's 3,
It's
2,
okay.
1, go.
Right.
All right,
Hopefully, Stas is entertained by this.
we'll try one more
So,
time.
are you recognizing how
Endlessly entertained.
This will be in the outtakes,
welcome
by
to
the
my
way,
life.
just so you know.
Stop.
So what we're saying, easy changes are here to stay.
Yeah, all
Okay.
together.
Okay, good.
All right.
Now that I'm clear.
Yeah.
It only took me 3 times.
All right, speaking of 3, 3, 2, 1.